My name is John Dunkley-Williams and I am the local and family history librarian for Bridgend, based at Sunnyside, sharing a building with the Register Office, where we house all sorts of local history resources, including some of the materials that you'll see on the display board today, and much more about all the other aspects of Bridgend's local history also. As for our topic today, during the Second World War, the nation held Warship Week throughout 1941 and 42 all over the country. Warship Weeks were British national savings campaigns during the Second World War, with the adoption of a Royal Navy warship by a civil community being the end goal. A level of savings would be set to raise enough money to provide the cost of building a particular naval ship. The aim for cities was to raise enough to adopt battleships and aircraft carriers, while towns and villages would focus on cruisers and destroyers. Smaller towns and villages would be set a lower figure. Once the target money was saved for a ship, the community would adopt the ship and its crew. Local charity organisations, churches and schools would provide the crews of the adopted ship with gloves, woolen socks and balaclavas. Children would often write letters to the crew members. When possible, officers and men from the adopted ship would visit the local community. To celebrate their visit, a parade would often be organised in their honour. During the early parts of the war, the Royal Navy not only had lost many capital ships, but was facing increasing pressure to provide escorts to precious convoys in the Atlantic. While there was not a shortage of sailors, ships sunk by enemy action had to be replaced. Between 1941 and 1942, the concept of national savings was introduced by the British government. Each region in the country was provided with a savings target, and this would be based on the region's population, each with a general level of savings having a class of warship assigned. This became known as Warship Week. Due to its similarity with War Weapons Week, which was a drive to replace the material lost at Dunkirk, through a savings campaign. The ship's commanding officer would exchange plaques, objects and photographs with the city or town that reached the target set, and an adoption would begin. The number of warships adopted in this way was over 1,200, and this number included battleships, cruisers, destroyers and trawlers. The HMS Urge was one such submarine, a British U-class submarine built by Barrows and NASA's Vickers. With a displacement of 540 tons on the surface and 730 tons submerged, she carried a complement of 27 crew and was armed with 6 21-inch torpedo tubes and one 3-inch gun. Her speed was 11¼ knots on the surface and 10 knots submerged, and she cost £200,000 to build. Lieutenant Commander E.P. Tompkinson, Royal Navy, stood by during her building, and with the exception of one uneventful Mediterranean patrol, he was her commanding officer throughout her history. Lieutenant Commander Tompkinson was also listed in the Navy's top 10 of submarine aces. The full list of the submarine crew was as follows. She was commissioned in December 1940 and is the only Royal Navy ship to have borne the name. Most relevant to us, she was adopted and paid for by the people of Bridgend as a result of the National War Bonds Drive Warship Week. Bridgend District Warship Week was held from November 15th to November 22nd, 1941, the target being to raise £300,000. For the submarine H.M.S. Urge. A programme of events was scheduled in the town, beginning with an opening parade. Whist drives took place all over the county throughout the week, and dances were held at Kempwick Hill Church Hall, the Palais de Dance, Newcastle Schoolroom, the Marine Hotel, and at Pyle and Kempwick Welfare Hall throughout the week. There was also a dance recital by the Browning School of Dancing at Dunraven Hotel, and a Grand Association football match at the Brewery Field, with the Royal Navy playing off against the Royal Ordnance Factory. The opening parade was reported to be a mile long, and reading directly from the paper, After he had taken the salute, Admiral Burmester addressed the crowd and organiser on the magnificent parade. It was most impressive and showed that Bridgend district really meant business. In adopting the HMS Urge, they were sponsoring a warship that had already obtained fame in the Royal Navy. Our submarines were playing a great part in the Battle of the Seven Seas, and HMS Urge had already made a solid contribution to victory. "Let your slogan be," said the Admiral, "success to the Urge, and the Urge to success." The chairman of the Warship Week Committee announced £68,000 had already been raised. Bridgend District Warship Week did not reach its objective £300,000, but the final figure of £215,623 was a very creditable result given the population of about 10,000 people, compared to our current population of 50,000, and with many families being short of men owing to the war. Also, when you consider the value of money 70 years ago, £200,000 compared to the value of money in 2005 would be £5.7 million. In February and March of 1941, HMS Urge carried out 2 patrols in the northern waters, and on the 14th of April 1941, she left Portsmouth for Gibraltar. While on passage, she sank a laden tanker of 10,000 tons in the Bay of Biscay. HMS Urge sailed from Malta on her first Mediterranean War Patrol on the 14th of May 1941. In the December of 1941, she took part in the First Battle of Sirte, a largely uneventful battle that ended in the favour of the Italians. She was continuously active in the central Mediterranean and the South Tyrrhenian Sea until she was lost in 1942. HMS Urge was one of the first British submarines to land commandos by canoe, and a number of successful raids were launched from her in this way. The raids targeted infrastructure such as railways. Such operations were naturally hazardous, and in October of 1941, a member of the crew was lost while trying to rescue an Allied agent from the shore. During her Mediterranean patrols, she torpedoed and sank 2 8-inch gun cruisers and a destroyer, and torpedoed and damaged an armed merchant cruiser. She also levied a heavy toll on the enemy's military reinforcements and supplies. She sank a very large transport of the Duilio class of 23,600 tons, and another transport of about 9,000 tons. Also 2 large tankers and 3 supply ships of medium size. Nearly all attacks carried out by the HMS Urge were against ships and convoys heavily screened and escorted by aircraft as well as surface forces. One heavily laden tanker, a 9,000-ton troop ship, was sunk by the HMS Urge out of one convoy, which consisted of a troop ship, 2 tankers, and a medium-sized enemy supply ship. The exceptional importance of this convoy to the enemy may be judged from the fact that it was bound for Tripoli, and had a close escort of 5 destroyers and aircraft, and a covering force of 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers. The Urge's attack was brilliantly executed, and she fired her torpedoes from a position within 300 yards of one of the enemy destroyers. The skill with which the HMS Urge was handled enabled her to escape from several very heavy counterattacks, with depth charges which nearly always followed an attack on these heavily escorted targets. After one attack, the Urge was counterattacked with 40 depth charges, and after the attack in which the Urge sank her first 8-inch gun cruiser, the submarine was hunted for several hours, and 64 depth charges were dropped by the enemy. On another occasion, when attacking a heavily escorted convoy, the Urge had a very narrow escape. She fired her torpedoes, one of them hung up for a few moments in the tube with its engine running, however. This caused the submarine to break surface. She was at once seen by the surface and air escorts of the convoy, who rushed to attack. With great skill and coolness, the Lieutenant Commander Tompkinson and his crew regained control of this submarine and extricated her from a very dangerous situation and the heavy depth charge attack which subsequently developed. Malta was under heavy bombing, and it became too hazardous for submarine operations eventually. In April of 1942, the decision was made to continue operations instead from Alexandria. In September of 1942, sad news was announced by the Admiralty, urged overdue and must be considered lost. The loss of not only the submarine, but also Lieutenant Commander Tompkinson was a harsh blow. The burly skipper of the Urge, married with a young daughter, was a popular CO. Tompkinson had accounted for 26,000 tons of shipping sunk and a further 37,000 tons damaged. Lieutenant Commander Tom O. Tompkinson was even the Royal Navy tennis champion for several years. The following decorations were awarded to the HMS Urge's officers and crew. DSO and Bar to the commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Tompkinson. 3 DSCs and 1 Bar to the DSC-11. DSMs and 2 bars to the DSM. In addition, officers or members of her crew were mentioned in the dispatches on 11 occasions. The HMS Urge was actually only the first of several submarines adopted by Bridgend Town and County in this way. This part of Bridgend's history is not widely known, and most that do know something of it know only of our famous HMS Urge. But there were quite a few more vessels adopted in the same manner by Bridgend Town and County. Bridgend Town itself later adopted a second submarine, the HMS Tudor, which also had a successful career, though she wasn't launched until much later, her first assignment being in August of 1944. On the 12th of January 1944, HMS Tudor departed Plymouth for Holy Loch. She made the passage together with HMS Tantalus, and they were escorted by HMS Roosevelt. On the 16th of May 1944, HMS Tudor departed from Holy Loch bound for Gibraltar. She is to proceed to Trincomalee to join the Eastern Fleet and the Southern Asiatic Seas. HMS Tudor was captained by Lieutenant S.A. Porter, and one of their first missions involved the night landing of a reconnaissance team, from which all returned safely. And it was shortly after this, while patrolling North Sumatra, that she sank her first boat. Tudor served in the Far East for much of her career in World War II, where she sank 5 Japanese sailing vessels, 4 Japanese coasters, and another Japanese vessel, as well as an unidentified sailing vessel north of Sumatra. She also spent some time laying mines off the coast of Burma. She survived World War II. On the 23rd of April 1949, Tudor arrived at Halifax, Nova Scotia, to begin in a 3-month tour in Canadian waters, helping train Canadian surface vessels in anti-submarine warfare. Tudor returned to the UK in July 1949, relieved by the HMS Tally-Ho. The submarine was sold for scrap on 1st of July 1963 and broken up at Fassling. The plaque from this adoption is held by the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth. Other areas of Bridgend held their own warship weeks too. Ogwr Valley adopted the HMS Cornet in 1942, a boom defence vessel or net-laying ship. These nets were steel anti-torpedo or anti-submarine nets, and she operated off the west coast of Africa. The week of fundraising in Ogwr Vale began with a reception in the Queen's Room of the Ogwr Valley King's Head Hotel, followed by a mass parade of the services and public gatherings at 90 Mile Memorial Hall and St. George's Square. Ogwr Valley were given the target of £50,000 to raise, but they almost doubled this in raising £86,702. The population at the time was 10,800 people, meaning they raised over £8 per person. In addition to this, the Garra Valley Warship Week also raised a further £25,000 in their own Warship Week, wherein Captain Pritchard took a salute after inaugurating the Valley's efforts at Faldi Square, Pontycummin, where contingents of the forces and many other organisations marched past. For their £25,000 raised, the Garra Valley adopted Her Majesty's torpedo boat number 57. The HMS Quinette was initially charged with the protection of the South Atlantic convoy routes. In 1940, she took part in Operation Menace, an expedition to capture and occupy Dakar in the French West Africa colony, now Senegal. Tondy and Aberkenfig are reported to have planned their own warship week also, raising another impressive figure of £46,878, having been set a target of just £31,500. The Lyric Cinema was filled to capacity for a showing of Les Miserables, supported by 2 other films, with all proceeds going towards the effort. The MTV in Poitiers was number 47, for which the plaque currently residing at Carnegie House commemorates. The other areas in scope for this particular one would have been Tondy, Aberkenfig, Bryn Sarn, Coedrehen, Brynmenyn, Pen-y-bont and the Fountain. Porthcawl were presented with a target of £55,000 to reach for a motor torpedo boat of their own, number 84. Captain Pritchard was again in attendance and received the salute at Porthcawl Pavilion. It was announced here that Glamorgan as a whole was actually ranked 4th in England and Wales for having raised the most money per head. At this point, an average of more than £11 per person. The Porthcawl Amateur Dramatic Society put on shows at the Grand Pavilion, and a dance was held at the same venue. A gypsy sale was also held at the Hope Chapel Schoolroom in Newton. Motor Torpedo Boat, or MTB, was the name given to the fast torpedo boats by the Royal Navy. The motor in the formal designation, referring to the use of petrol engines, was to distinguish them from the majority of other naval craft that used steam turbines or reciprocating steam engines. The capitalized term is generally used for the Royal Navy boats and abbreviated to MTB. MTBs were designed for high-speed operation at night, or low speed to keep noises low and produce no wake, and maneuverability on the water, allowing them to ambush effectively. This would enable them to get close enough to launch their torpedoes at enemy vessels undetected, then make a rapid escape. With no significant armour, the boats relied upon surprise and their agility at high speed to avoid being hit by gunfire from bigger ships. My Stag held their own warship week in February of 1942 and had a target of £100,000 to raise for a corvette. HMS Mallow was a Flower-class corvette commissioned into the Royal Navy that served as a convoy escort during World War II, with the Royal Navy in 1940 to 1944 and with the Royal Yugoslav Navy in exile from 1944 to 1945. In Yugoslav service, she was renamed Nada. Her main armament was a single 4-inch or 122mm Mark IX naval gun, although a significant number of secondary and anti-aircraft guns were added towards the end of the war. During the war, she escorted a total of 80 convoys whilst in British service, sinking 1 German U-boat, and escorted another 18 convoys whilst in Yugoslav service. After the war, she served in the fledgling Yugoslav Navy as Nada and then Partizanka, before being returned to the Royal Navy in 1949. Later that year, she was transferred to the Egyptian Navy, in which she served as El Sudan until she was discarded in 1975. The Flower-class corvettes had their origins in a sketch designed by the Smith Stock Company, which was based on their whaling ship, Southern Pride, but lengthened by 9.1 metres. Many ships of the class were modified while they were under construction, or as the opportunity presented itself during service. Mallow had an overall length of 62.5 metres, and her standard displacement was 925 tonnes. She displaced 1,170 tonnes at deep load. She had a crew of 85 officers and enlisted men, and she was powered using steam created by 2 Admiralty 3-drum boilers. The engine drove a single propeller, and she could reach a top speed of 16.5 knots. She carried 230 tons of fuel oil, which gave her a range of 3,415 nautical miles at 12 knots. The ship was armed with a single 4-inch Mark 9 naval gun, 2 depth charge throwers and 2 depth charge rails, and could carry 40 depth charges. Ships of the class were also initially equipped with 2 twin 12.7mm machine guns and 2 twin 7.7mm machine guns. Later in the war, ships of this class received 2 additional depth charge throwers and their capacity was increased to 70 depth charges. The machine guns proved inadequate as air defence weapons and were replaced by heavier guns in 1944. Mallow's anti-air armament included a total of 6 20mm Oerlikon cannons and 1 2-pounder pom-pom autocannon. This was intended to better meet the higher air threat in the Mediterranean Sea. She was also equipped with rocket rails fitted to the gun shield of the 4-inch gun, a forward-firing anti-submarine Hedgehog fitted aft of the main gun, and a Type 271 radar fitted on the rear of her bridge. By 1945, Mallow's armament had been further enhanced with 2 6-pounder Hotchkiss mounts. Mallow was quickly put into service as a convoy escort from July 1940. Her first convoy was OB 187, which departed Liverpool on the 21st of July. During the balance of 1940, she was engaged as an escort for 24 convoys, as they left from or arrived at Liverpool. On the 17th of November 1940, she picked up 18 survivors from the British merchantman St. Germain, which was torpedoed and sunk by the German U-boat U-137, north-northwest of Tory Island, off the north coast of Ireland. During 1941, she escorted 22 convoys to and from Liverpool, as well as 3 that departed from Milford Haven in Wales. On the 1st of July 1941, Lieutenant William Robert Boyce Noel took command of Mallow. In September, Mallow was part of the escort convoy for HG 75 from Gibraltar to Liverpool, which lost 4 merchantmen to German U-boats, including 3 sunk by German U-boat U-564. In October 1941, she was serving with the 37th Escort Group based in Liverpool, along with 2 sloops and 7 other corvettes. On the 19th of October 1941, Mallow and the Shoreham-class sloop HMS Rochester sank the German U-boat U-204 near Tangier, using depth charges. During 1942, Mallow escorted 15 convoys, again mainly to and from Liverpool, and escorted the same number in 1943, remaining with the 37th Escort Group covering the United Kingdom, Mediterranean and Sierra Leone convoy routes. On the 10th of May 1943, temporary acting Lieutenant Commander Harold Thomas Stewart Closton assumed command of the Mallow. In December 1943, Mallow was no longer listed as active on the Royal Navy list. On the 11th of January 1944, Mallow was transferred to the Royal Yugoslav Navy in exile and renamed Nada. She sailed with a nucleus crew in convoy OS-68 or KMS-42, which departed Liverpool on the 12th of February and arrived at Gibraltar on the 25th of February. Nada then commenced escort duties in May, conducting a total of 17 convoy escorts between Gibraltar and Port Said to October. During her final escort of 1944, she was detached from convoy KMS-66 as her crew was not considered politically reliable, because they were not aligned with Josep Broz Tito's partisan forces. She is recorded as participating in one escort in early 1945. After the conclusion of the war, Nada was taken over by the fledgling Yugoslav Navy and renamed Partizanka. In 1949, she was then returned to the Royal Navy and reverted to HMS Mallow. The requirement to return Partizanka was a painful blow to the Yugoslavs, as she was one of their few modern warships in service at the time. On the 28th of October 1949, Mala was then transferred to the Egyptian Navy, where she served as El Sudan. She remained in service until 1975, latterly in a training role, and was discarded later that year. The plaque in Carnegie House also commemorates the HMS Mallow, in addition to the HMS Urge and Tondian Aberkenfig's MTV 47, and was only recently discovered and brought up to Town Council, where I then noticed it and what it was. We hope to mount and display the plaque following the presentation at Bridgend Local and Family History Centre at Sunnyside, alongside the already mounted plaque for the HMS Urge. More recently, you may have seen the attention the HMS Urge has had in the media as having been found after disappearing 70 years ago. The last known location of the HMS Urge was Malta, where she departed from on the 27th of April 1942, heading for Alexandria. No definite explanation was ever agreed upon as to what happened to the submarine. Jean-Pierre Misson had been working with the Libyan Department of Antiquities in the summer of 2012, and had been taking advantage of the sheltered bay of Marsa El Halal to train divers. On one occasion, they headed straight for a GPS-marked wreck position of a large tanker. They almost immediately got the image of the wreck on their scanner display, but could not hold their position in the weather, and so resolved to return another day better equipped. The state of the world was due to shift, however, and so this never happened. Jean-Pierre obtained sonar recording to study the wreck further, but it wasn't until a number of years later when he identified not just part of a tanker, but also a submarine, which he believes to be the HMS Urge, having deviated from the normal route from Malta to Alexandria. He made the following technical observations of the sonar, which led him to believe this to be the case, and I'll read now directly from Jean-Pierre's correspondence. The following technical observations confirm that this is a British U-class submarine. 1. A bulge in the hull for the hydroplane mechanism. 2. A gun on the foredeck, with a widening of the deck to provide platform for the gun and to facilitate its manoeuvring. 3. The protruding portion of the periscope casing atop the conning tower. 4. The after end of the vessel is very typical of British U-class submarines. The outer casing did not cover the pressure hull entirely. And 5. The radio mast. Jean-Pierre has continued looking for more information these past 2 years to support his claim, and has also unearthed an Italian magazine article detailing the sinking of a British U-class submarine in the time and place that have him convinced that this is also the Urge. There is a file of his collected correspondence, including his sonar images, kept at the Local and Family History Centre for anyone interested in scrutinising those further. The reception of this discovery was a cold one, and Jean-Pierre was largely ignored until the media took up the story. And unfortunately for Jean-Pierre, having finally won some attention, was only denounced and claimed false, and eventually the Ministry of Defence endorsed the following response. It is not known with certainty how the HMS Urge was lost, having sailed from Malta to Alexandria on the 27th of April 1942. At the time of loss, the official view was that it was most likely that HMS Urge struck one of a number of mines which were laid by Axis forces at the times in the approaches to Malta. This remains the most likely cause of loss on the available evidence, although until the wreck of the submarine is found and positively identified, other causes cannot be ruled out. Those other causes include the possibility of an attack from Axis submarines or a depth charge attack by surface ships, although no Axis claim was made at the time. Although unlikely, there is a possibility that an accident could have caused the loss. Finally, there has been recently been media interest in a claim of discovery of the HMS Urge's wreck off of the Libyan coast, based on a sonar image and a report of an attack by an Italian aircraft on a submarine. The evidence around this claim has been evaluated by the relevant UK government historical authorities at the Naval Historical Branch of the Ministry of Defence and is not considered sufficiently strong or credible to disrupt the official view that the most likely cause of the loss was to a mine near Malta. It appears impossible that HMS Urge could have reached the site of the object discovered off of Libya at the time of the purported attack at her speed in the sailing time available, and unlikely that she would have taken the risk of departing from her ordered course even if it had been possible. The inconclusive nature of the reports of the purported attack and the attack of the evidential weight of the lack of evidential weight of the sonar images of the object pending any photographic images or external visual evidence are additional factors which have to be taken into account. At this time, therefore, the official view is that no claim of the discovery of HMS Urge has been substantiated, and it remains most likely that the wreck of HMS Urge lies near Malta as a result of loss to a mine. For this reason, and as a sign of respect for the crew of the HMS Urge and their families, any suggestion that she was lost in another location or that her wreck has been discovered should not be presented as fact. This is especially so in the absence of any official recognition or acknowledgement by the family representatives. Given the current political climate, the diving of the wreck for confirmation is impossible for the foreseeable future, and having spoken personally to the current person responsible for the naval branch at the MOD, in his own words, there is simply no way Jean-Pierre's claims could be proven in this situation. I myself am certainly no expert on the subject, let alone on the reading of sonar, but hopefully I can at least provide clarity on the claims that have peppered the media for the last 2 years. And so there we have it, the naval fleet of Bridgend County during the Second World War. A U-class submarine, a T-class submarine, a Flower-class corvette, a boom defence vessel, and 3 MTBs, 47, 57 and 84. The commemorative plaque for the HMS Urge is at the local and family history centre in Sunnyside, with a second piece mounted upstairs in Carnegie House. The plaque for the HMS Tudor resides at Portsmouth Museum. The plaque for the HMS Mallow and MTB 47 will soon join the plaque for the Urge at Bridgend Local and Family History Centre, and the Ogwr Valley Historical Society has possession of the plaque for the HMS Cornet, which they rescued in 2004. The plaques for the Garrow Valley's MTB 57 and Porthcawl's MTB 84 remain unaccounted for, but hopefully they still exist, as these did, in someone's garage.